Welcome to Cybersecurity Refined and Feral, where refinement meets chaos in the digital world. We invite you to join your co-hosts Candy Alexander and Cailin Sullivan in another open conversation on topics related to cybersecurity.
Welcome to Cybersecurity Refined and Feral. I'm Cailin Sullivan.
And I'm Candy Alexander.
Today on Cybersecurity Refined and Feral, we are tackling the complex and critical topic of AI risk models and frameworks. The landscape is constantly evolving so fast. It's imperative to understand governance and structure around AI, and that's no longer optional. It is essential.
To guide us through this intricate world of risk models, governance, and technical controls, we have two absolute rock stars. These gentlemen are on the forefront or front lines, helping organizations translate these dense frameworks into actionable security strategy. And that's the key word, actionable.
So first off, we have Ken Huang, the CEO of Distributed Apps AI and a significant contributor to organizations like OWASP, the CSA, which is Cloud Security Alliance. Ken's work is focused on the practical implementation of AI security risk management, and that makes him uniquely qualified to discuss this framework with us. So welcome back, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Cailin and Candy. Nice to meet you, James.
You too, Ken.
And next, joining us is James Kavanagh. James brings a wealth of experience in helping major enterprises build, secure, and govern their complex technological ecosystems, if I could fit that all in on a Monday. He also seen firsthand the struggles organizations face in taking on high-level AI frameworks and integrating them into existing GRC and risk programs. I must say as well, I became an instant fan of James' work when I read about a year ago some of his very practical, straightforward work in regards to AI risk management and working with engineers. And I never heard anybody keep it straight and hitting it right on the target, in my opinion, James. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be on this call and be part of this. And nice to meet you, Ken. I've read everything that you've published recently on Maestro, and it's great work. So it's really nice to be able to join this call.
Awesome. Thank you guys both for joining us. I think we should just dive straight in. So I'm going to field the first question to you, Ken. How would you define AI risk management framework for our audience?
So the AI risk management, first of all, it's a risk management, right? Then AI, because of some non-deterministic nature of AI, it enlarges the traditional risk management framework. That's why NIST coming up with NIST AI IMF, and then you have ISO coming up with 42001, and then EU AI Act, right? And different state has their own within US has their own kind of state regulations. White House trying to stop it, but it seems not successful. So we will see like California, right, just enact the AI Act, it's official there. Virginia also has it. There's a few other states. So yeah, but risk management certainly is really important. If you just look at the NIST framework, you have to govern, decide who is the manager what. You need then mapping your risk, and then you can measure the risk, and then you manage it, right? So this is the process. But yeah, I think we will talk more detail. Yeah. about that today?
It's almost like a baseline, right? It's just like setting up expectations and guidelines.
Yeah, it's baseline. I would say NIST AI IMF is a really good framework, certainly. Although it's not mandatory, but it's a good framework. Yeah.
Um,
So, and I appreciate that answer, but I guess one thing that would help me and perhaps our listeners is, understand is that we've all in cybersecurity been using risk frameworks for some time. I mean, that is, in my opinion, the foundation of what we do. So, what's the difference between a traditional risk framework versus AI? What is the new challenge, if you will? Because I mean, to a lot of people, AI is still pretty scary, and now you want to put a risk management program in. So what's the big difference, and why is it so important for us to really learn about AI risk frameworks?
Yeah, I let James take us first, then I follow up.
Yeah. So yeah, happy to, Ken. I mean, I as you guys probably know, if when I'm writing in my blog, I always like to start with stories. I think stories kind of
Yeah.
illustrate points better than just sometimes some of the textbooks. So let me give you a story, and we'll see if that helps. Um, there's an organization in Australia, a retailer called Bunnings, and they sell hardware. They're the biggest hardware stores in Australia, and they had a problem a few years ago with safety. Your people coming in being violent to the workforce, so they put in place video surveillance so that they could identify potential reoffenders, and they would spot them, compare them against a list of pictures, and call in security straight away if somebody walked in the door. Pretty cool solution. It worked really well as far as money was concerned. Dropped safety issues for their staff, for customers. Great idea. Until the privacy commissioner in Australia said, absolutely no way. You're not being transparent. You haven't got informed consent. What about these biometrics that you're collecting? How are you matching them? And so he said, no, you got to stop this. This is serious, and you have to. They ruled against Bunnings. Now it's still going on in courts because Bunnings fought back and said, no. You're weighing off different risks, and it makes sense. But I think when you think about risk management, Bunnings are really good at tech. And they have a really good security framework, and they put in place good security and privacy practices for that particular narrow problem. But what they didn't probably realize was that machine learning and AI brings in a whole bunch of extra dimensions. So it brings in ethical risks of, is it fair, is it safe, is it appropriate to be using this kind of CCTV cameras passively surveilling people and comparing them against a face match. Totally prohibited under the EUA Act, for example, questionable in many places. So they didn't think about that as a primary issue. They thought that if they just showed, a notice when you walked in the store, that would be adequate. And the commissioner said no. They didn't really think through all of the right ethical issues around that, and they kind of basically took a technical security focus to what is
Mhm.
like a social and a technical problem. And I think the difference between AI risk management and maybe what is sometimes a bit more technical risk management is all of these social dimensions, all of these ethical dimensions that actually come into it. And we're still learning how to put in place good practices around risk management for that. And so, I kind of go, well, what is risk management? It's really pretty simple. Well, number one, it's a shared language. So you can have your lawyers and your engineers and your scientists and your business people talk about a shared language. That's kind of number one. Number two, it's a process. So it's, well, how do I identify these things? How do I analyze them? How do I mitigate? How do I treat them? How do I monitor? So that process is really important. And then there's some machinery around that, around how do escalations happen, how do incidents get learned from, so that we manage risk. And then finally, and I think this is where Ken's work is really useful, is there's some kind of control library or control selection approach. So you say, here's the risk, and then here's the control that can help it. And so you put those things together, it's kind of Lego bricks. Put those together, that's your risk management framework. And that's in AI, it's all about addressing those very broad set of risks with a framework that you build up with all of these different Lego bricks. To me, that's risk management framework in AI.
So, if I could offer, I think one thing that is key that you've hinted to is the application. And what I mean by that, it's the use case. What is the situation? Is it in the case you just mentioned? It's the store doing some CCTV surveillance to understand the threats, if you will. So
Yep.
it was the situation, the use case, the technology, and the practicality of it, right? And I think that that's the piece that really exposes the AI component, because that now introduces the potential risks associated with AI, the hallucinations, the unfair bias, and so on and so forth. Um, what's your take on this, Ken?
Yeah, I think both of you have really good viewpoint here. Maybe I build a little bit upon. For first of all, certainly it's additional risk, like the traditional risk management framework still apply.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you cannot say, okay, because AI, we don't apply the old risk. So the traditional IT risk still apply. Now you have the AI, especially agentic AI, right? So the whole risk methodology or tools or framework does not exist for non-deterministic agent. For example, the how do you do the mapping? How do you do threat modeling? Right. That's why we have the Maestro framework. How do you actually measure the risk? Because if you cannot measure the risk, how do you manage it? To Jim's point as well, right? Um, so if you really trying to measure it, you need to give kind of a score or maybe a decision, right? To this what I'm leading the OWASP AI VSS project. We're trying to do that. Many people participate, and then the control that AI CM control. That the Cloud Security Alliance, Candy, James, yeah, you guys all involved, and also red teaming. How do you do TEVV? What in the right? It's called a TEVV in this term, but it's red teaming, right? So there's also Cloud Security Alliance and OWASP, all make lots of good contributions. So this is one thing to think. It's more like from the risk framework, you need a new tool, new methodology. Another way is really in the traditional sense, when you deploy a application, you just need to do some security testing, some validation, SAST, DAST, right? Penetration testing, red teaming, then you are enough. But with agentic AI, eventually you think you're onboarding a digital co-workers. So this onboarding process is different. Can you immediately trust your agent, right? So that's I think in one of the conference there is some discussion. Yeah, my point is it's drastically different. Some people think it's still the same. I think it's different because if you have your agent as your coworker, you
Mhm.
maybe manage it, but the onboarding process is not just the do the red teaming all this. You still need to have thinking about all this access control. How do you trust? How do you understanding the intent, right? How identity is defined. So we are not there yet, but this is really important. Right? This is a part of the thing that we need to actually figure this out before the wider use of agent. I think one thing I always say, the risk management or security is enabler for your AI
Mhm.
deployment. It's
Yeah.
not overhead. So if the company thinking it's an overhead, then they will not take it seriously. If they think it's an enabler, it's one of the key component, then they will, right? They will invest.
Mhm.
It's part of
Well,
the
well,
Hopefully.
that's the problem, Ken. It's like, yes, I agree that a good risk management program is an enabler. Cybersecurity and risk management are business enablers. But here's the thing is that trying to get corporate America or corporate global to executives to understand that we're not the Department of No, and that we're not looking to stop things, but we're looking to enable it to happen safely, securely is the challenge. That's the challenge, whether it's AI risk management or regular risk management. It's just trying to get that hurdle. But I think now may be an opportunity with the introduction of AI, because a lot of corporate executives don't understand and they want to listen to what are the risks and how can I mitigate them, right? So maybe this is our opportunity to really have executives understand truly the intention of risk management, regardless.
What do you guys think is the main driver for? I feel like the societal influence and culture of movies and Skynet, Terminator. Like people hear AI and automatically are like, "Whoa, whoa." What is that? Why people are going to start listening to security more? Like if there was a cultural understanding of security in general, I feel like businesses and business leaders would be more apt to listen, right? Because people don't understand AI, but they know that it can go bad, and if it goes bad, it can go really bad. So, like, what do these people have to say about it?
Well, I don't actually know that people are really all that interested unless you can connect it to their actual use and the value they're getting from the technology. And I think we're in danger in some ways of doing with AI what we might have done with cybersecurity, and probably wasted a little bit of time with cybersecurity, talking about compliance and talking about regulatory requirements just too much, and to the extent that if you're adopting AI, and like I'm using AI a lot in our business, and it really frustrates me to hear the compliance being so important and regulatory requirements being so important. Actually, what I'm really keen to do is to innovate fast and do it safely. To move fast is the most important thing. To do it safely, to do it securely, to do it lawfully, that comes like as a mature business professional will realize that's important. But you've got to recognize first it's about adopting. And so I think one of the things we've got to do from an AI security and safety perspective is recognize people want to adopt this innovation first. They want to see value. Our job is to embed ourselves into that value creation, not stand on the sidelines. And I think in much of the work, and we talk about risk, and sometimes we kind of default into let's talk about NIST or let's talk about ISO and so on. I think they're pretty counterproductive in most cases. And one of the topics that I have when I talk with students and the people I'm teaching is a question sometimes like, "What's the best risk framework?" And I go, "The best risk framework is the one that you build yourself with the engineers and the scientists and whoever is actually creating it. The worst risk framework is the NIST AI RMF or ISO 40001 or any of those, if you just take them off the shelf and try and apply them." And I think a lot of the work for us as security and safety professionals, even if we're deeply in control land and compliance world, is to actually lift ourselves up out of it, sit beside the engineers and the scientists and the business people, and learn their language. And I think we're wasting a little bit of time, a little bit like we did in cyber, trying to impose order on chaos when we actually should go and sit in the chaos and work in that chaos. And I'm not saying like we shouldn't use these frameworks. They're absolutely brilliant. But I don't know that we need to try to impose them on teams that are just trying to move fast and not break stuff.
Well, is it because it comes back down to the checklist mentality? Just give me my control framework. Let me check. Do. Yep, I do this. So therefore, my risk is none. But if you look at all of the frameworks, the first step is to, I remember, when NIST SB 853 came out, and, I was foolish enough to print that book out. It's like, that's not what you do. It's like, the directions say right in the beginning, take and implement according to your environment. Not every single control is going to be for you. So I really appreciate, James, you saying the worst frameworks are going to be NIST AI, RMF, the 4201, and so on and so forth, if you don't apply it to your environment.
Okay.
Ken, what do you think about all of this?
Yeah, I do believe that the framework that NIST, AI, IMF, ISO, or OWASP, CSA, that's usually sector independent, horizontal framework. So you just blindly apply to it, it will not work. Certainly, you have to tailor to your environment. Back to Cailin's question about some of the cultural phenomena, like all the movies has a Terminator with AI. I think this is the human's imagination, right? I think, oh, this AI is so powerful, maybe they trying to terminate us. There is a non-zero probability that will happen. That's why the frontier model builder, like if you really build a powerful model, certainly need to be regulated. It's has to go through all this. I think this is what the EU AI Act was aiming for. And also the Biden's executive order was trying to do. From geopolitical reasons and also different frontier model builder, they still trying to moving forward. And we are not to that point yet. So I think at this point, we still have the room for innovator, but I do believe the frontier model builder certainly need thinking about this probability. But for our application, if we want to deploy HR application, right, or Medicare application, we should more focus on the security, right? If this agent deployed, it disclosure sensitive data, or it may give some bad advice, right? This has to be tested. This is a risk management framework. It may have some of ethical society impact, but the majority of it really should be really on deep into weeds on the security testing. So the go back to risk management framework, right? I do believe that all this framework give us a kind of methodology or a way of thinking, but you can always have your own way of thinking. That's true, right? For your own particular sector, because all this is sector independent. You have your own sector. Like if you're a pharmaceutical company, you may have your specific sector specific. And even like the superscaler, right? The AWS or GCP, they have their own security framework,
Yep.
right, for their own use. They may be mapping to what we have, right? But yeah, I think you have to tailor to your environment.
Oh,
But
so like me being a SaaS company, I shouldn't like implement my AI program like we do medical devices? Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
So you're talking about a SaaS company do the medical advice?
Yeah, if my SaaS company, I want to implement AI, but I'm going to require the same controls and compliance that a healthcare industry would. Is that that's not how we do things?
No, because it comes back to, right, gentlemen, it comes back to your risk profile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is it that the executives care about? Do they care? Because let's go. It goes back again to the cybersecurity golden age of risk management, right? Like I would often say, compliance is a risk. You can comply
Mm-hmm.
and not be at risk, or you choose not to comply and therefore you are at risk. In other words, I don't know, I seem to recall a number of years ago there was a major financial institution or Wall Street, right? And they chose not to comply with regulation from financial institution. I can't remember if it was SWIFT or PCI or something like that. They decided that the cost of compliance was going to be more than the fines that if they were caught. So they chose not to comply, and if they were caught, they would pay the fines. It was much cheaper. So that's why, isn't it the case with even AI, right? I mean, perfect case, we'll go back to Meta. I love to pick on these guys because they deserve this. When we saw in the news this past summer that Meta actually reviewed the risks associated with the companion bot, and that the companion bot could potentially have issues with adolescents, children under the age, with sexual exploitation and so on and so forth. And they chose to accept the risk of that happening. So that isn't that what the thing is that you just don't pick, like NIST AI RMF and Kabbalah should go with that, all those controls. It's the executives deciding what they will accept for risks and what they won't, and then apply those appropriate controls. Am I off on that?
Yeah, but I think, Candy, in most cases, from a board level and executive level down, there's a really strong understanding that you want to grow, you want to thrive, you want to create innovation, but you need to do it within guardrails. And
Yes.
those guardrails are not just to be lawfully compliant, but also because businesses run better when they have guardrails. Like
Yes.
engineering teams run much better when they have guardrails around their pipelines. And a junior engineer will tell you, take away all the restrictions and I'll create great innovation. But a senior engineer will tell you, give me the guardrails, and then we can move fast. So I think there actually is a pretty good understanding across most business that guardrails, call it compliance if you like, but guardrails make sense and they actually help you to move faster. I talk about it in kind of a bit of a spectrum, though. To your point about Meta, I kind of look at it. There's kind of three types of looking at compliance. To me, there's like checkbox compliance, which unfortunately I think is probably normal. It's a little too common, and that's like going through the motions. We tick the boxes, we satisfy the requirements, but are they really being applied? Are we really getting the safe outcomes? That's kind of sometimes questionable. Many of us have worked with companies that have ISO 27001, and I still go in and go, ooh, that's scary. So the checkbox compliance in the middle, I think high integrity assurance is the other end of the spectrum. It's when you have really high integrity around what is the intent of these control frameworks, these risk frameworks, these
Right.
laws, and how do I bring their intent back into my organization? And that's high integrity assurance to me. And like, good example, even in big tech, like Waymo is a great example of really high integrity assurance. They're very deliberate, very careful. They stick to the law. They do a lot of safety testing. And then you take, maybe Cruise or Tesla, and you go, not quite so much. So that's one. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is like to your Meta point, is malicious compliance.
Mm.
And to me, malicious compliance is when you know what the rules are, and you know the intent behind those rules, but you either seek to subvert those rules through lobbying and influence and work on the side and change the standards to meet your business, or you say that you're complying, but you knowingly know that you're not.
Right.
And like, you could really argue that in Europe, for example, just look at the frequency of fines against big tech for GDPR, and you really have to say, is that really checkbox compliance or is that malicious compliance?
Right.
Mhm.
And I think in AI we have a danger of possibly being somewhere in that checkbox malicious kind of world if we don't embed it much more fully into our engineering practices and get people more on board with safe and secure real
Well,
practice.
I absolutely love, and I want to highlight this. I love the fact that you pointed out the guardrails, because in my opinion, the work from CSA, their controls matrix, the AI controls matrix, and the OWASP, right? These are the guardrails. These are the really smart people that got together and thought about the things that could happen if you don't apply these controls. So those are the guardrails, and they are important. And in my opinion, those are the frameworks, right? What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, yeah, I think just a few points. First is the compliance can be accepted as a risk. Like if you non-comply, you pay the fine. I think some company do it. I don't think it's a good idea to do it uh, because it's you financial loss is not just the fine you pay, your reputation damage, or other things. It's really hard to measure, right? So compliance, it's also concerning some of legal requirement, right? There is a lot of downside. That's really hard using the risk management approach, like typical risk measure to measure it. Uh, and regarding the different control to manage this risk, yeah, certainly, especially with agentic AI like AICM, we increase some of the categories. The original 17 category now is
Mhm.
19, right? So we have the data and the model security uh, that should apply, and hopefully it's can be helpful. I don't think it's perfect. It's need different
Right.
revisions. Uh, yeah, I would also agree with the James comment in terms of if you are in critical area, like if you have the self-driving, right? It can cause the safety issue, right? So you need more. You have to have compliant in terms of the high fidelity or whatever the name called, right? You have to have. But if it's maybe PCI DSS, maybe if you are not apply, you cannot store your credit card. Then you're just using a payment service, right? You don't
Mhm.
store it. Maybe it's fine, but I would not suggest to do that as well. One thing is about the agentic AI. What we did in the OWASP AI VSS project is we find out 10 different what we call risk amplification. So it amplify
Mm.
risk.
Oh,
So
okay.
yes, autonomy. So if your agent has high autonomy, that's increase your risk. So even you think
Yes.
it's a small thing, it could be big, right? And the
Mhm.
tool use, if you have a lot of tool use, could be, right? If you
Yeah.
have memory, so we have a 10 core like amplification factor that you need to do to measure your risk, and then with that you know that which one you need to fix first or do apply the security controls.
So it sounds like the traditional, if I could do a really simple interpretation. The traditional risk management was probably two-dimensional. And now that we have AI, it's third dimensional, and perhaps with agentic, with the amplification factors, that it's like, quadruple dimensional or something to that effect. So it's all the more reason that if you haven't started to really think about AI risk management, that you should probably get on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And also using AI to make a lot of autonomy, right, as possible, as much as
Yes.
possible autonomy. So that's also help. So uh, I do see like some company just say, okay, we already have risk management framework. We already have all these tools. We just need to apply to it. That's not sufficient. I certainly, in my book, Generative AI Security, I said you need a new program. This new program does not mean you get rid of older program. You need to actually augment your program with the AI, right? The things like the process or procedures, right? All this you need to revisit, right? And uh, some uses like AI usage policy, shadow AI. How do you deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So this is all things that I think it's a lot of work for CISO. That's why you need a team sport. CISO, it's maybe not enough, right? You need a CAIO, CISO, CDO, all those people working together to map out for organization wide what your AI risk could be if you deploy your AI applications internally or
Mhm.
customer facing, right? It maybe have different risk management profile, but you have to
Yeah.
deal with it. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like there needs to be an addendum, thinking contract legal terms, an addendum to the risk management framework. There's your AI addendum. Um, I actually had one question. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about how there's different, like, I don't want to say categories, but different ways to interpret
Domain.
looking at risk.
Yeah.
And I think with the introduction of AI, we're introducing another category of risk into it, which is ethical risk, which I don't think is something traditionally that has been seated in risk management teams. Agree, disagree?
No. So I think it comes down to the maybe the audience that you're thinking about. So in traditional cybersecurity, yes, it's relatively rare to see ethical risk come up, and often if they do come up, it's about like ethical hacking or the appropriate way in
Mm-hmm.
which you might use certain tools. But ethics and ethical and good corporate governance has been fundamental to kind of bigger enterprise risk management. It's always been the case that a company needs to think about sustainability, needs to think about their ethical role, needs to think about fair treatment of their workforce, those kinds of issues. I think it's more a case of um, folks who might have traditionally focused on cybersecurity or might have traditionally focused on IT security in some way now have to kind of augment their skills and look at some other dimensions that they might not have looked at in the past. So it's not that it's brand new. I wouldn't say it's brand new. I'd say it's just that it's expanding the realm of people who might have primarily focused on technical areas.
Mm.
But if you look at this like from a cybersecurity perspective, I can remember the days when social engineering was starting to emerge, and then when we had to start thinking as cyber people about, well, there's people, there people are annoying, like people are frustrating, people like we can't just implement controls 100% reliably. We have to teach them, and we have to put in place mechanisms around them, and we had to learn that as cyber people. And in some ways, I think that it's just the same case here. We've got to expand the realm of thinking. one of the dangers, I think, is that we think those things are soft, or like there's the hard risks that are technical in nature. They do damage to data, and then there's soft risks that are ethical or fairness or even safety issues and toxic content. And like, I totally dispute that. There's no such thing as soft risks. Those can be the worst possible business impacts that you can have. And I think one of the big challenges for people who might come from a technical perspective trying to get into AI safety and is understanding how to translate what are kind of social and ethical and other issues into hard measures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very doable, but that's often difficult for people who might come from an IT security background to have to
Yeah.
deal with, like, fairness and equalized odds measures and things like that they've never had to deal with those kind of things before.
So
Yeah,
where do you
you
start?
definitely read our minds, because that's exactly where we were going. So do you have any recommendations on how to start translating that over?
Yeah, so the ethical, societal, or safety, uh, I think, or in more general term, responsible AI. Um,
Mhm.
when the AI become important, AI exists since early 50, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just suddenly, but the generative AI, because of ChatGPT, that's meaning its capability exceed the prior generations of AI. That's give the regulator some warning that we need to focus on ethics, societal impact. So from ethical and societal or safety, uh, every framework talk about that, like in this the framework talk about that. ISO also talking about it. EU AI Act certainly is really deep into it.
Mhm.
Uh, so that is not like existed before, right?
Right.
In the IT system. So the main reason is because AI, like there's a few generation. The AI exists since early 50s when professors at the Dartmouth College say coined this term, right? There's a up and the downs, but this is the new generation of AI, which certainly has more capability that really gives regulators from different countries warning that you actually need to enact the regulations so the company can comply to it. That's why society, all this ethical, uh, safety, and societal issues are in the regulation. It's in general term, people using different terms. So it's called responsible AI, and there are
Yes.
years many organizations establish responsible AI business unit or organization, right?
Yes.
So it makes sense. But Cailin, to your question, how can we translate this, right? Uh, there is a softer score, there's harder score. As much as possible, I certainly agree with James. We need to translate it to using harder score. There is some of the score which is more subjective. It's not so easy. Even with like AI VSS project, we are doing it. We're trying to give it a score. It's hard, I would say. Like the difference between 5 to 6 is different from 6 to 7, right? The score, this jump, like it's not an even jump. How do you
Mhm.
define this jump, right? So this is really hard one, even from the purely security perspective. But if you really look at this hard score for ethics, it's I think even harder. But that does not mean we should not try.
Right. And I think that that is probably the biggest challenge I see before us collectively. And the technical profession implementing this is how do we quantify the risk associated with, shall we say, responsible or safety? And that goes back to the conversation we've had in a previous episode. I think we're doing really well with the technical aspects, right? If you don't implement it in this regards and protect your, models, or have a good understanding of data governance as a predecessor to implementation, but there's nothing really foundational and solid and generally accepted from the ethical, responsible, human, potentially affected side of AI. And that's the scary part. So I appreciate very much that the EU AI Act put down some foundations there, but now we need to, and maybe it comes back to, it's up to each organization to set that risk scale in place. I don't know. James, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I actually think a lot of those dimensions can be quantified, and it is possible to set targets and commitments, but I think it takes a bit of work. So a very common pattern I see is that, and you see this across a lot of tech companies, especially, they talk about responsible AI principles, and they're committed to be fair and to be safe and so on. But you really have to scratch the surface a little bit to say, well, and what is your commitment?
Mhm.
And how do you measure that commitment? And how would we actually test that commitment? And I think in pretty much every dimension of that is ethically reasonable, like whether it's fairness or whether it's not causing harm, or even some of these issues now that are emerging around the threat of suicidal ideation or things like that in social media, or chatbot interactions. I think you can quantify those. I think you can make commitments as an organization that are measurable and reportable and testable, but it takes a bit of work. And so, like, I teach this kind of methodology of saying, step back and go, what are your principles and what are the values of your organization? And unfortunately, what I think is a lot of organizations stop there. And what they really need to do is ask the next question, which is, if that is our principle, if our principle is, let's say, fairness, then what do we commit to? And you say, okay, we commit to equity in hiring processes. We commit to having a recourse channel or something like that. And then you go, okay, that's good. You've got a set of commitments. Now, how are you going to measure those? And put some numbers behind, equalized odds distribution or demographic parity, whatever those measures are. And I genuinely believe that you can take those all the way through to real hard numbers that a CEO can stand up and say, we promise this and here's our measure. And some companies are doing this. Like if you look at a couple of different companies, like Logitech is an interesting one. Novartis, AstraZeneca. Look at some of these companies and the way they specify responsible AI. They say, here's our values, here's our commitments, here's our measures, and it's really cool to see that, because that shows they've actually internalized those. I think some other companies, sometimes we see it a little, and we let people away with this. We let companies away with this too much, is where they talk a big game, but they're really just kind of washing the ethical responsibility with a lot of talk and then the odd certification thrown in, but it's ethics washing, and that's what we shouldn't really tolerate as as governance professionals. That's not okay, and I think that's our opportunity. Like, let's define those real commitments and hold companies to account.
So that's interesting, because I think what I'm hearing, well, let me take my counter or comment on your last point there, because I think that was profound. Do you think, or do we expect in the future to see organizations posting on their website or making public their definition of responsible AI? what their position is?
Do I? I
Yeah.
certainly hope so. I look for that in terms of not just what they describe might be an ideal world, but what are they actually doing? What are they measuring? How do they demonstrate it? And I think we will probably emerge to requirements around that. Like if you take corporate governance more broadly and you look at financial accounting standards and
Mhm.
sustainability reporting standards and things like that in this same domain, there
Right.
are very specific standards.
Right.
And I think we will get to the point of similar levels of standards on transparency and reporting in these dimensions as well. Just going to
I
take
hope
time.
so. I hope so. But going back to get to that point, however, where an organization is prepared, that their position, a position statement on what their definition of responsible AI is and how they measure it and, how do they implement it. I think one thing we're going to see is going back to that risk management committee, if you will, or executive council, that this is not a cybersecurity factor, that when we look at that risk management committee, that now we're involving people, the head of people, HR or whatever, and engineering, of course, because they need to know from the development perspective requirements. And so now even more profound will be that collaboration of interdepartments within an organization, even more so now, if that would be the case. Thoughts?
So I think that there's a few points to kind of unwrap here. First is you do need a team sport, a different team getting together to put this post. But before that, is this post like what needed to be, right? What James is talking about is we will do this, what is the measure, what is exactly score we're trying to reach. I think if we can do that, it's really certainly it's good. Uh, and uh, but currently it's not industrially standard yet, right? You go to different AI companies. Uh, there's no standard format of how they deal with responsible AI. Some company even don't have the responsible AI organization yet. So I think it would take some time, but it's really important to go back to what we discussed. It's always thinking the responsible AI or risk management framework. It's an enabler of
Mm.
your AI deployment, and it's become necessary in an enabler, right? It was nice to have in traditional IT system. Now with AI deployment, especially with agentic AI, I think this is a necessary component.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have amplified risk, right, with
Yeah.
agent.
Exactly. That's the part. I always, think about agentic AI as being that intern, that you bring on board, and do you really want to trust him with the keys to, all the systems, give him root access and all that. So you probably don't want to jump to that level right off. But so I want to begin to bring this conversation to, again, actionable conclusions. So when I know, again, both of you do a lot of work with organizations around the world in regards to AI risk management, governance, and what do you see as the biggest common challenge that organizations face? What is the biggest hurdle for adoption? Is it the lack of skilled people, funding, model transparency, defining their risk profile? We'll start with you, Kim. What do you see as the biggest hurdle that organizations face?
So the racing model, I think who actually owns this piece? It's still not really clear, right? It's maybe CISO, maybe CIO, maybe CEO. I think a CEO should own it, right? So then the board has to own it. Like if your CEO, the board owns this, then you can have this implement. Skill certainly is a bigger gap. Like the AI people, they are really happy with their work in the AI, right? And the cybersecurity professional is really interested in AI, but is trying to catch up with so many things. So we do have a really good task force on the security,
Yeah.
but they need skill training on the AI. It would take some time. Like it's not just overnight. You suddenly become AI cyber professional. So skills, especially also from the compliance and also from the actual engineering, AI security engineering perspective, right? So all those are the risk, and also the another risk is many of the companies they still don't have security program for the AI risk management. They still don't have it.
Mhm.
So
That's
yeah, if
great.
you don't have it, like how you do it?
Yeah, yeah, that's scary, crazy, and I think that that's why, if I could offer that they should reach out to, get guidance from folks like you, whether directly engaging with you or researching and following your work. So, James, what's your take? What's the biggest hurdle for adoption?
I think it's it extends from what Ken said. But I'd put it more pointedly. It's a cultural problem we're having. I wrote a blog article recently that I think AI governance is turning into a significant cultural problem. And what I mean by that is I feel like we're drifting towards um, an emphasis on process and on regulation and on compliance, when really what we need to be focusing on is safety and security and lawful behaviors. And I don't know that we're necessarily building the right cultures in place.
Mhm.
Now, the question is, well, how do you build the right culture? And to me, I've staked building a new business on the answer being trying to build the right kinds of skills as practitioners in this discipline. And when I say AI governance, I mean AI security, AI governance, the law, the engineering practice of safety. I really believe we need these kind of magical people who understand models in AI, who understand security, understand the law, who are cognizant in human behaviors and risks of that, and actually have an ability to talk to each other with common language. And I think like the work like the Cailin and CSA and others do of building frameworks gives us some of the common vocabulary. But what we're missing, I think, a little is enough practitioner skill. So
Mhm.
it's a bit like you guys have been in cyber for a long time. You're very experienced in cyber. You wouldn't say that you're a great cyber person if you've got your CISSP, right? So it's not the certification that makes you a great cyber person. It's
Mhm.
the practice, it's the hands-on
Mhm.
experience, it's all the like messy realities.
Yeah.
um, that's what makes you great at cyber. And I think we're in this kind of world right now is where we don't have enough people who have had the opportunity yet to really be hands-on in the messy world of AI governance and AI security. And so we've got to inject those kinds of skills. We've got to create learning experiences and collaborations and all sorts of ways of building up those practitioner skills, because I think we can't fix the cultural problem if we don't fix the skills problem. And the skills problem is all about not textbook theory, but like hands-on hard work of learning
Mhm.
this stuff.
I
Mhm.
couldn't agree anymore. I so appreciate both of you saying that. And I think, again, um, it's really good to hear you say this, James, that it's not all about the textbooks. It's embracing this world exciting world that we're approaching with AI. And I know so many organizations and or cybersecurity people like, I don't want to play with that. Play with it. That it's okay, right? And that how else are you going to learn than to embrace it, not fear it, and it's just understanding the basics. And thankfully, there's such phenomenal material out there offered through the work that both of you gentlemen are involved with. Ken, you and the work that you're doing, the books you're writing, the work you're doing with OWASP. I giggled when you said that we don't understand who owns it within an organization, AI implementation. I mean, I have to go back to one of the first times I met you was through the working group with CSA and the organizational responsibilities, which was a phenomenal, piece of work. And then James, a lot of the work that you're doing with your new company, the blogs that you write and the posts that you have, that if you do not learn about AI through what's publicly and freely available out there, you need to get out of underneath that rock, to explore. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us. I would like to give you an opportunity. Ken, how can folks follow your work, connect with you on LinkedIn? What's the best way to keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, I post lots of my thoughts in LinkedIn or also Substack. I have like 30,000 subscribe at the Substack. So it's growing every day. So yeah, hope you guys join the Substack. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. And James, how can people get a hold of you? I know you're on the opposite end of the world where the three of us are, being down over there in Australia. So how can people follow your work and get in touch with you or whatnot?
Yeah, so everything I publish now is on aicareer.pro, so you can just go there and have a look at the website. There's some free courses as well as like the programs that we run. But one of the things I love doing, I talk to pretty much everybody who joins the program just one-on-one. Or even just, I send out my Calendly to people just for chats, because you probably can guess I just love talking about this stuff, so I'll happily have any excuse to talk. So like I'll reach out, I'll talk to anybody who wants to work in this space or is learning in this space. But aicareer.pro is our website, and you'll find all the blogs and everything that we publish up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I could personally go on for hours like you, James, talking about this kind of stuff, because I think it's fascinating from all perspectives. But to our listening audience and maybe our YouTube watching audience, we hope you found this insightful. We would love it if you could share your thoughts, give us a like, comment below, follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn, and until then,
if I could say it, until then, until next time, stay safe, stay secure, stay refined,
and don't be afraid to get a little bit feral.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.